Welcome everybody to UnDisrupted, the podcast for tech leaders by Future Ready. Adam, I'm going to start out with this. Have you ever felt like there's certain meetings that just could have been an email? I've seen those memes going around. What do you do when you're in one of those meetings, especially now that we have to do these things virtually? So you're like sitting there on a Zoom call and you have to act engaged. Is there any tips out there for our listeners to help them with that?
Well, it's one of those things where we've progressed. We are having Zoom meetings now that we wish we could have had before that were face-to-face meetings. It went from like face-to-face meetings and let's take people like, oh my gosh, this could have been like a Zoom meeting. This could have been a Google Meet. And now we're spoiled now. Now we're at the point where it's like, oh, these Zoom meetings, it could have been an email. So it's just a progression.
I won't say who shared this with me, but he may be on this podcast. But he actually, so I knew someone who actually looped a video of, there's a way you can actually loop a video of yourself watching a Zoom meeting and then just play that as your virtual background, which I thought, a kid's going to come up with that and be just brilliant. So
I may or may not have done that. It's just that thing, you can't move too fast.
Yeah, the key is no sudden movements. Otherwise, it's like that scene in Speed where like the lady's purse goes down and up in the loop. With that, I'm going to invite in our guests here. So Rob Dickson is the Chief Information Officer at Wichita Public Schools. You can follow him at ShowMeRob on Twitter. Joined by Dyane Smokowoski, and she is the Coordinator of Digital Literacy, also at Wichita Public Schools. You can follow her at Mrs._Smoke. I like that Twitter handle. What do y'all think? What are your thoughts on that? Have you ever experienced that where there's like meetings that could have been an email?
Oh yeah, and I think even we have way too many solutions out there to communicate, because then it's like, was that in a chat? Was it in a meeting? Did we, so just finding where I had that conversation is sometimes difficult.
Oh gosh.
Dyane, what about you?
I have to tell you though, I'd rather drum up a quick call to get things hammered out with the teacher when they're brainstorming ideas than to do it in email, because it's faster and I can go to the next call. So I'm cool with whatever.
Yeah. Also, I think the tone is important. I mean, people get into chat conversations and I'm like, I won't say who, but I'll just say I live with this person. And I tell her, I was like, just call her, call your friend. You're having a misunderstanding. Just call her. She's going to hear this later and be like, I can't believe you said that on the podcast.
I will tell you this. Isn't it wonderful sometimes when you have this kind of a conversation, because then you can walk around and do things? Sometimes like, can we just switch to the phone, please?
Yeah.
And it's all good.
Yeah.
And now with AirPods, you can just kind of leave it in your pocket and walk around. Yeah.
Like Key and Peele has this amazing skit where it's like the whole text message and they're misunderstanding the text message. He's like, oh, I know he didn't.
All right, we got to put that in the show notes for sure. Do we have show notes? I don't know. So we always start out with kind of a fun question too, just for our panelists. So our first fun question. This is actually, I think Rob, you're probably the closest expert on this, so I'm going to ask you this question: what's the biggest difference between Nebraska and Kansas?
Man, I would have to say sports talent. How's that? Biggest difference. Talent. Having lived in Nebraska and understanding that they have, it's the third largest city in Nebraska is on game day of the Nebraska Huskers. And so, but their team hasn't been good since the early 90s, but they still sell out every single game. They have the highest sellout crowd in NCAA football history. It's crazy.
Wow. And being a UT Longhorn fan, I commiserate with them here in Austin for sure. All right. Adam, you want to get us started?
Cool. Like right now, this school year is something that I think none of us signed up for. Definitely. If I knew this, I probably would wait another year to become a technology director. But let me ask you this. How has the start of this year been going, and what issues do you foresee that that's gonna pop up that haven't come up just yet?
I'd have to say for myself, having been in Wichita now a little over a year, I can't imagine any other year like this. Like it's been crazy. Just to get acclimated with the district and then stealing smoke, I think was awesome. Had I not done that, I think we'd be in a world of hurt. But then thinking about how much we progressed, even a month seems like a year, right? And it's like, when I think about, we just did 160 sessions of PD with our teaching staff in the month of August, and it seems so long ago.
Yeah.
Like it just seems an entirety ago, and it's literally just a little over, 2 months ago. And so it's that part of it. I think time is standing still right now because we're dealing with so many issues. But I would say this, like, we're 1-to-1 for every My School Remote, and we're offering internet where we didn't before. So we're doing things we've never done before.
And now think about this, friends. I mean, the whole world has moved some cheese in the last couple of months, right? And if you think about it, from August 1st until today in October, teachers have shifted their practice, shifted their workflows, learned new technology skills that some had never experienced in their past, and are starting to understand personalized learning at new levels. That is 2 years of graduate school in 2 months of time.
Yeah.
And we still feel like we're on the precipice of really understanding what's possible with kids. And we did all of that in a tidal wave of information. But gosh, you got to celebrate teachers these days, because this is a cheese that's like moving a whole wheel, not just a slice.
By the way, I wanted to say that I think the hashtag stealing smoke should definitely be a trend on Twitter at some point. Hashtag stealing smoke. Well, speaking of that, celebrating teachers, Diane, I'll follow back up with you on that. So how right now how are we maintaining? There's a lot of stress out there. I see a lot of tweets, a lot of Facebook, a lot of teachers quitting. How do you guys help like maintain their sanity and self-care for your staff and for yourself? Are there techniques or tricks you guys are doing?
So that is a real issue across the country, right? From sea to shining sea, teachers are tired, they're stressed, and they just are really doubting, am I doing enough? But I don't know how I could do any more at the same time. One of the things that we are doing is, first, we do the very best we can to bring in positivity. We're teaching them how to do things like improv games in virtual settings so that you can still build that community experience with students. If you can't be face-to-face, we can build that in this virtual sense. Almost to the point, my friends, you know how we have connected in PLNs for quite some time, and you build these networks, and then when you go to something like ISTE, it's like, everybody's in 3D, right? You've got these great relationships before you meet. I see those things happening in these virtual classrooms, in these distance learning classrooms. That's one thing. And it may sound that it's trivial that we're playing these kinds of games, but we're just giving more strategies for teachers to tie content in engaging ways. That's one. And then we are building quite a few virtual field trip event days so that teachers can get a breather as we and the ed tech team are coming in to provide some real world connections to what they're doing and bring a little bit of magic to the classroom at the same time.
Nice.
Rob, that's so cool, because like you mentioned that, because previously all this stuff that we talked about was always so abstract to a lot of educators. It was like, oh, you guys are just dreaming. That was this, one day we'll get to this. But, as you mentioned earlier, this was something that we were forced to, but it's a good change. I mean, we have to look at all the crazy stuff that we've been forced to do with social distancing and all these things of that nature. But it's always good as educators to look at the good that's coming from the situation that we've been put in. And it's amazing that you've really been able to kind of highlight that, what the work that y'all are doing.
I think we're also kind of reaching out to the family model too. I've never known another year that we've done more programming for parents. Just understanding that school is happening in their home, and they're working from home, and, they're shopping from home, and they're doing all these other things from home. And, we're just preparing, like this Thursday and Friday, we have Parent University again. And we had it in August. We're going to do it again Thursday and Friday. We have a podcast happening on Thursday where we're going to have some students on to talk about digital well-being, and what you do on screen time is just as important as how much screen time you have.
That we need to chop that little sound bite. That's what we need right there. Put that on a loop for people to know it's true.
Yeah, because Carl, I know you've done a lot of talk about that screen time stuff. It's not, and I don't, I don't want to misspeak because I know this is your area. I mean, you were one of the first people who really brought it to light, even before it became like an app within the iPhone and Android devices to chart your screen time. I mean, heck, now they have it on your Alexa where it's charting your screen time now. So it is a thing, but it's like you said, it's what you're doing with that screen time.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think that switch, I don't know the noise if it's there like it was here, but I mean here it was a lot of noise about what are they doing, what are the hours versus the quality, and I feel like that's kind of had to die down because of this. I don't know if that's good or bad or another unintended outcome, but I think parents and teachers are finally, or the parents especially, are seeing like, wow, I can now see some of the great benefits of this too. Do you guys see that as well?
Yep.
Yeah, and go ahead, Smoke.
I was just saying, and also this has shifted. Instead of being a consumer tool, it's now a creative tool.
Yeah.
And we've been trying to do this in ed tech for since the beginning of the iPhone. And now teachers are like, and students are like, wait a minute. I could be mobile and create my Flipgrid, or be mobile and do a creation piece instead of having to write everything on paper. Turns out, right? So we're making those shifts there as well.
I think it's an awareness piece for parents. So like, I have a senior this year, and my awareness of what she does is less than it was when she was an elementary student. But I think about, our elementary kids today, they're using Seesaw to create their projects, and parents' awareness in Seesaw is so high because they have the availability just to see that. I think their awareness is much higher in that, and they begin to trust the process then just because their awareness is there, in which when you get to high school, like I got a senior and now I have a 21-year-old and a nearly 23-year-old, my awareness of what they do on those devices is very limited.
And, we mentioned earlier, this has been a year of change. I mean, there's just been, we've been caught in this realm of COVID, but also we've had equity issues around social justice and everything. And I've always tried to challenge people, even prior to this, what are you doing when the hashtag is no longer trending? Because, that's when the rubber really meets the road, when it's not that sexy topic to talk about. So, with all that being said, this season, we're really going to look at equity issues on our UnDisrupted podcast. So, what have you seen in schools and strategies that you can probably take from that, or some of your own, to share with other leaders out there on things that we can do to help bridge this equity gap that we see in access and how students are creating and using the digital media tools that we have out there?
Yeah, I would say we prepared teachers differently this year than we had any other year, and just making sure that when I think about equity, because we've taken the processes away, every student has a device, every student has internet, those logical processes are already in place and gone. Now it's thinking about, how do I keep my student from having a circumstantial experience based upon the digital literacy of that teacher? And I think it goes to, when we provided professional development this year, it was not all instruction. It was half a day instruction, half a day of practice. And I think it helped our teachers get along further. Smoke, what do you think?
Absolutely. We definitely centered very intentionally on creating opportunities around technology integration, as well as cultural responsive teaching at the same time. The other piece that would be a wonderful thing for your audience to know about, and Rob and I were actually talking about this today, is one of the best resources on the web is unbounded.org. And this group is tremendous. They're one of my favorite places on the web. And they have the math and the language arts pieces, the math aligns with Engage New York. And from pre-K babies all the way up to our seniors in high school, they provide opportunities for teachers to look at the lessons that they're covering in class, and with that cultural responsive lens to it. And everything, my friends, is free. And I don't know about you, but free is always in my price range.
Hey, free 99, free 99.
And it's a tremendous resource around that for us to use, be better practitioners in what we do. Also, just this last weekend, Rob and I both attended the National Convening for Equity with NSTOY, the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. So there's this beginning, growing, and expanding conversation around what is equity, how do I teach and understand my own personal biases, and then how do I build space to have a responsible discussion with students and other peers.
I mean, that's so good because funny equity story. I was in the district and we were doing a lot of work around implicit bias and equity and racial justice and things of that nature. And so we had these lists of questions that we would ask our new teachers. And one of the questions had to deal with equity. And new teacher, you know, bless his poor baby's heart. I'm from the South, so, you know, bless her heart. She went in there and she was like, yeah, I haven't bought a house yet, so I don't really have that much equity right now. But I hope, you know, to really get a lot of money from this job and get some. And
yeah,
I agree. Bless her heart. Sweet thing.
God love you. Yeah, context is everything. Yes. So right before we got on the air, we kind of joked about this, but I think Rob brought it up. It's like, what do y'all think this looks like 2 or 3 years from now? I mean, honestly, Diane, you mentioned a lot of things that we've gained out of this just quickly as teachers. What stays, what goes? I mean, if you guys put on your future thinking hats for future ready, what do you think stays and what goes in the next 2 or 3 years when it comes to this pandemic and what we do afterwards?
I'd have to say we're about to build a new technology plan, probably like 3 years out. And, you know, the gear that I think shifts the most is the use of space and time. Mm-hmm. So when we look at, I think as a system, you know, we're trying to break down all these old systems, but when you think about it as a system, I think we're just now realizing that, well, when students are in my school remote, guess what? I don't have to have the same periods of the day that I have in face-to-face. And when we come back, guess what? Face-to-face doesn't necessarily have to have the same function and the same structures that it had before. So I think that one's the one that probably shifts the most. Smoke, what do you think?
I would echo that. I would also add the fact that I believe that the community partnerships are going to have a whole new level of connections that they've never had before. Right now, we cannot take students on field trips, but zoos, museums, nature centers, nonprofits, all these places where we would have connected for our classroom, now they're coming to us saying, wait a minute, is there a way that we can still make these connections virtually? We need to be friends. I'm like, well, we needed to be friends a long time ago, but let's really be friends today. So I think you're going to see the real world connections to learning are going to be easier to make. And I also believe that we're going to see more cross-curricular partnerships. I believe that with my heart in the secondary level as well, that this is going to be an opportunity for me as I come from 8th grade language arts. But imagine if my 8th grade ELA class was partnered with the 8th grade algebra class. What can we do together? How can we build these connections purposefully and provide application and context, as we talked about that a moment ago, for our kids? Or imagine if we took welding and mixed that with biology. What can you do when you pull these elements together and talk about project-based learning for real? We have said, or heard is a better word, how many times I just wish we could go back to normal. Friends, I don't want to go back to what that was, but I do want to be at the table to design what the future will be.
Wow, another good one. And I'm like thinking in my head. You mentioned also, I think earlier, Diane. See, now you've got me calling her Smoke. Okay.
Everybody calls me Smoke. It's okay.
Okay, Smoke.
Even her label outside her door says Mrs. Smoke.
As long as you say Smoke and not Snoke, there's a big difference there.
Right. Star Wars. I was just thinking, though, you were saying earlier about the personalization, too. I mean, as the overarching theme of all of this, and I feel like maybe now, I mean, I've been preaching it for over a decade, that technology can help with that. And I think now we're probably starting to see finally that scratches that surface of that in terms of like kids being able to differentiate just in terms of how those assignments are going out, how they're coming back in, what they're working on. I finally think that that's something that will continue on throughout. I hope this will continue on after this is all said and done. We're back to quote unquote normal.
It just took the pandemic, right?
Yeah. I mean, and this is really, in my mind, what school choice is all about. Before we talked about school choice as being going to a different building, and school choice now is really about the choice on how a student learns and how they develop and how parents learn and how we can all get together and figure out what's going to be best for our students, for our children. So to me, this is school choice. Who needs a voucher? I mean, this is what we need to be doing.
Right.
We've brought a lot of positivity in this podcast. Y'all have been great, but I want you, both of you, if you can, just give us some encouragement for all the listeners out there, the millions and millions of listeners of this podcast, to keep them undisrupted during this time period.
Don't be perfect. I think one of the things that Smoke and I deal with all the time are these teachers that expect that time and those sessions to be perfect, and it's not going to be. You're going to have glitches, and everything else is going to happen maybe on a daily basis. I mean, I look at our call quality dashboard. We average 450,000 calls a day. And so when you take that and you say 6% of those are poor quality, that's still like 19,000 calls, 20,000 calls. So then understanding that 4% is not going to have a great experience that day, and that's okay. Your exchange for that is health and safety, right? Yeah. And so I think that's where I'm coming from. Smoke.
I would add that it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. That's human. And here's the other part is to remember that you're not alone in this. And you have a wonderful support team of other teachers, other folks who are ready to step in and say, hey, do you need a breather? Do you need to tag out for 5 minutes so I can come in here and talk to your kids and do a read aloud? Do you need 5 minutes so that I can just, sometimes I just need to turn my camera off and go, okay, and then I can come back in.
Breathe. Yes.
That is okay. And I would tell you that it is okay to have fun with your children. Mm-hmm. And we so stress over, did I cover everything that's on my progression guide? Did I do it all today? Super friends, we're in a world of molasses, all right? So if it takes you a little longer to get through a lesson, but you built better connections with those babies so that they had the confidence to turn on their camera and be engaged in your world today, that is a celebration that you need to stand up and cheer. And it's okay to have a dance party with your babies on the call. Just dance it out.
I totally have a dance party right now.
Yeah, we agree all the time. Dance. What's that dance? I don't know what I'm doing there. I don't know what to do with my hands. I think you guys hit a lot of nails on the head there. I mean, there's so much out there that we're trying to get through with all this. I mean, the world, I love that we're in a world of molasses. I think it's true. And what's funny is I just saw someone post the other day that they were talking about learning targets. And if you remember when those came out, it was like a big thing, like make sure your learning targets are visible on your wall. Some teachers the other day said somehow our learning targets aren't visible on our wall, but our kids are still learning. So I think it's all about that, which isn't a slam on those. I think it's still important to have them. But I think, when we really get into like, does it have to be written on a wall? No, it's still about that learning, about that process. And it is okay to have those dances. I think that's awesome. Well, thank Rob and Diane. Thank you guys for joining us. Plug yourselves real quick. Tell us, where can we find you guys and your great work?
Hey, visit our website, usd259.org. We've got some amazing things coming up. Follow Smoke. She's Mrs._Smoke, and I'm Show Me Rob on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us. And for the listeners out there, be sure to subscribe and give us a review. We'd appreciate it. And we might even give you a little shout out on the show in the future. You never know. So this has been the UnDisrupted podcast brought to you by Future Ready Schools. He's Adam, and you can follow him at AskAdam3.
And he's Carl, and you can follow him at Mr. Hooker. And remember, we're better together.
And we are better undisrupted.
UnDisrupted.
This podcast is made possible by the generous support of Amazon Web Services.